Yeah, it's funny. I think everybody has that kind of pat answer about the specific, moment. And I actually don't precisely know what came first or in what order. I think my only memories are being obsessed with magic, but seeing Blackstone on Reading Rainbow was a big thing. Sherry Lewis of Lamb Chop did a lot of magic. I had a kind of like babysitter daycare center and they had a magic kit. And so I don't know what order those things happened in, but those were, I think, the big ones
Well,
that really got me started.
what was your first, do you remember your first performance? What was it like and how old were you?
I don't remember my first performance. I have a video of me doing like a birthday party at my kind of daycare center babysitter when I was, I believe, either 4 or 5 years old. And it's, not good at all, but it is, it's a fight. I had the table with the props on it and a vest. So, I mean, you're already pretty much there. The thing that's funny is like I have all the magic shtick somehow that we never are able to shake. So
Right,
like I knew how to do that weird kind of like, hey, hold this. How's that look to you? Come up here, young man. But like
right,
I literally didn't know how to do magic. Like even the, self-working stuff in the kit, I didn't
right.
understand. But I think that counts.
Do you remember your first magic kit? Was it the one at the daycare or?
I think it was, yeah, it was that. I think it was called like the Hocus Pocus kit or something. Thankfully, all magic kits are kind of the same. So it's like I know it out of the cups. It had a few things with ropes. It had the, the shrinking wand slash disappearing wand.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure it had a bunch of weird cards with numbers on it that I didn't know how to use.
Yeah.
All the other, stuff they put in a magic kit that you aren't sure about. So
Love it. I love it. You performed everywhere from intimate rooms and bigger venues. Do you feel the setting or the venue changes the magic?
most certainly, it's quite fundamental, at least for me. But I think most people would agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
Without it being something I set about to do initially, I have found most of my favorite things are things where I'm able to think a little bit about the venue and what is going to fit there.
Mm-hmm.
The Ascanio stuff about the magical atmosphere really matters. Yeah, I think magic just is best when it exists in some kind of context. Ideally you should be able to do it anywhere, but I do think that to get those deeper resonances that we all want and those really special shows where everything just sort of feels like there's that group dynamic and the momentum. I think oftentimes it's part of why close-up magic is good. There's a dosage that's right, something to do with like the size of the space in relation to the size of the audience, the dimness of the light, and the energy or lack of energy of, I don't know, it all just,
Yeah.
there's a mix.
So I guess that would go into you. I guess the next question I have is, would you adapt the space? Like, do you adapt to the
Mm.
space or does the space adapt to you?
I think you mean over time or like in the course of the night, we'll talk about, we mentioned it kind of in preparation, like I've done a few sort of longer running shows in specific spaces. So that's obviously part of the question. But yeah, I think it's a mix. Like I have kind of more talking about one-off stuff, just like general
Mm-hmm.
work and magician things. Anytime I do a show, whether it's a show or just walk around stuff or something in between, I'll make notes beforehand on kind of what I'm planning on and what my set list might look like and anything. And then after the show, I write down like what I actually did, which, we know sometimes those things are different. And now I've done that for a while, and now it's really helpful because when I'm, you know, now when something comes up, I can kind of go back through my notes and find like what's a similar space or group to this, what's a similar length of time. So I have some kind of template to build off of and customize to some extent, but I'm also not starting from scratch.
Right. You trained actors like Bryan Cranston, Rachel Weisz. What's that like teaching magic to someone who isn't a magician? Are there things that they pick up on that a magician may not, or what's that
Yeah,
process like?
I love it because I think, in magic, we love the stuff. I love the stuff, and it's this whole world, and it's hard to do a double lift without thinking about 10 other ways you could be doing this. It's hard to do. It's just you have a lot of ideas about things, and I'm naturally curious, so I always want to tinker with stuff. And from what I've found, actors, or at least the ones I've been lucky to work with, they are so used to having to learn weird random things for roles and not being precious about it, or not kind of identifying with it in the way that I think we do in magic sometimes, that they are very good at just sort of learning this thing whole cloth the way you would learn a dance or anything like that. And they're just very comfortable jumping into a new thing. It's really quite surprising. So I found sometimes they're really good students because they're just like, let's do this. I worked recently with this actor Andrew Barth Feldman, and he did some things for this Saturday Night Live movie. I actually don't know if they made it in or
It
not,
was a great
but
movie.
he just, I think, just had cards around, but they wanted him to learn a bunch of things. And I was asking them, a funny thing was I only realized midway through our lesson that I had seen him, that he was a face I recognized because he was notably in this movie with Jennifer Lawrence, and we're talking about that. And I was sort of asking him, have you had to learn weird things like this? And he starts listing all the stuff he had to do for that movie that, because it was a movie, I didn't connect the dots, but like, he had to ride a horse in that. He had to be in a room with 10 dogs. He had to be naked riding on the hood of a car. He had to chug a bottle of wine. So
Right.
he's used to having to do a lot of crazy stuff under pretty significant circumstances. And I think that's pretty common with most actors. And in fact, I think for them, anything that, rather than them being like, man, why do I have to learn all this stuff? Which that happens I've had actors who are kind of very like, serious method actors, and they're just like, I'm already doing all this, deep, dark, emotional, whatever work, and now I have to palm a card,
Right.
and I get
Right.
that.
Yeah.
But I think for a lot of people, they're like, wow, you're giving me something tangible and concrete that will help me build this character. And that kind of means less work it means I don't have to do all that like deep inner,
Right.
what's my motivation thing, because I have a deck of cards in my hands. And so that's really cool. And yeah, it's just a fun experience, and it's very exciting to see how a thing gets made on set.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you talk about how actors, it's the opposite for magicians and actors. I feel like magicians can learn all the other things that actors may have learned already to make their magic better. And
Yeah.
actors are the opposite. They have all the things that dancing, singing, obviously acting. Now they have to learn some magic for a movie or a show or whatever it is. And it's interesting to hear that those outside or non-magic things do improve those things. Very interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't think about it like that until you just said it. Do you think actors are better? I wouldn't say better magicians, but do you think those skills make them better at performing certain sleight of hand?
I think in the short term, honestly, I think in the short term, I think in terms of like learning one thing, I think oftentimes people who are not I think we've all had that experience. And when I worked at Tannins, I would notice this, that sometimes the person who only knows one magic trick, they do a better job of selling it, because the hardest thing with magic is convincing people you're not, the kind of person who spends hours every day, that you're just like, I'm just a person who,
Right.
when I touch the card, it changes in my hand. And I think when somebody, again, that isn't a big part of their identity, it's almost it can be, assuming
Mm-hmm.
they have acting skills, which if they're a professional actor, they do. I think it can be easier for them to convey that sense that the magic is just happening, and I'm even kind of amazed by it. And I think they maybe also have a little more insight into what I'm not going to say layperson, I'm going to say normal
Mm-hmm.
person, in what a layperson thinks about.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think, and this again isn't just actors, but people in general, when they do their one coin trick, they're better at,
Right.
rolling up their sleeves, even if it's
Mm-hmm.
not important, because they know that the average person assumes the thing has something to do with this sleep. I don't know.
Right.
So there's some things on
Let's talk about Magic After Hours.
it. Okay.
It's a different kind of show. It's not just a performance. I think it's an experience. What was the vision behind it? What was your process getting it to live and be alive?
Yeah, it's really interesting, and it also goes to that question about like who adapts to who in terms of the performer and the space. So I'll give you the full thing because I think it's a good, like, I wish I could tell you I sat down one day with a notebook, envisioned the whole thing, and then just made that happen. So honestly, like, I'd had just ideas batting around in my head. I generally just found the idea of intimate close-up magic in like a small room very just exciting. And I was doing a lot of walk around bar mitzvahs at the time, so of course the idea of a dark room with 10 people who paid a ticket to see a magic show was exciting. I got reached out to by a company called Side Tour that was part of Groupon, and they just had people doing like unusual events in spaces, and they asked if I had any access to a space. And I had worked at Tannins, and I had used it as a rehearsal space a lot, so I figured that maybe I'll do that once and sell a few tickets and have people come. And the first few times I did it, I had a stack of note cards with like information about the history of magic in New York. So I did like a middle school, high school presentation for 45 minutes.
Cool.
And then I just sat down and did like a close up set. And then over time, and Adam Rubin is a really good friend and just like a teacher, and like just I've learned a lot. And he really encouraged me to think about the space in general. And Adam Blumenthal, who owns the place, also helped a lot with that, both just from an idea perspective, but then also starting to change some things about the design of the store and how it
Mm-hmm.
looked. And then over time, the show evolved, and Adam developed out the space a lot, and which is why it really looks very cool and magical. That was kind of partially because of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it sort of grew into this thing. What's interesting is for a long time, especially early, it was a little bit more, I'd say, it's still very, I don't think rustic is the right word, but something in that realm. But initially it was like it would just be me.
Mm-hmm.
People would come in, I'd have them walk around the store and
Mm-hmm.
look at stuff, and there'd be props and books out. And I'd kind of gather people to stand around the counter, and I'd do the whole first half of the thing there. And then so it was very casual. And now, for a few reasons, it's like they come and sit from the beginning. And I think I still do a good job of conveying, or an okay job of conveying that sense of like you're just in this place, but
Right.
it is a little bit more of a like sit down show.
Yeah.
So, and there are benefits and drawbacks to that, but that's sort of where it is now.
Very Tannins. It's
Yeah.
very Tannins. I remember when Tony Spina was at Tannins and the lectures that would be brought in. We've seen clips of it, just a darkly dim lit room and just select chairs and a table just in a half circle. And that was the lecture, or that was whoever was there. So it's really good to see Tannins kind of having that history of, I'll just say, the Tannins way, because that's really where it came from. Tannins Magic Shop, I don't think for your show is just a venue, it's history. How does the legacy of Tannins affect what you're doing there?
It's just such a big part of it because you hit the nail on the head, which is that we've all been in those rooms when there's some brilliant artist who nobody in the world outside of our small community has heard of is doing a thing, and there's this group huddled around them, and there's something very theatrically I don't want to say seductive, but it's the first word coming to my mind about that dynamic of the person. It's so rare now that a person has something to offer the world and they're not blasting, and it's how the world is and it's how you have to be, but they're not like blasting it every which way. All the, like the
Right.
idea, I talk a little bit about David Roth and how, he completely reinvents all these coin plots, and he's very coy about where you see these things. And, there's an element of that being totally nuts, like that you're going to create work and then be like, well, I can only show it to so many people. But there's also something very unusual and special about that it's this community of people who create these things, and it's really for this core, for
Yeah.
the people who appreciate it.
You're talking a lot about history, magicians. Was that something you wanted to, when you were creating or putting together Magic After Hours, was that something that was important for you to put into the show? I want history. I want the audience to understand how rich of a history that we belong to, where the art of
Yeah,
magic lives
I
in.
don't know if it was, again, I think there's that, like, I don't think it was, I liked telling stories when I did shows outside of there, but it wasn't something that I was very interested in magic history, but it wasn't something I didn't have like a pre-existing sort of imperative that people must know, like, I didn't have the proselytizing impulse, but I think it's that thing of like, so we're in this space and that feels natural. And I think a lot of it was kind of wanting to, because again, part of the thing that's special about, being in, any kind of magic session or thing is, you're hearing all these names and there's this whole, it's not just the magic tricks, you're kind of being inducted into this whole world of stuff. Um, I'm a Harry Potter geek, like
It's
everybody
okay. So
else,
am
and
I.
it's like, you know, I don't think I don't think people remember. I mean, like, yeah, shoots some blue flame at one point. He does this
Mm,
stuff, but the most magical thing is getting this letter and finding out that there's this world and there's
right.
this school. And so I think that to me was always the thing. It wasn't that I'm like, well, magic exists, but then there's history to it. I think for me, all that history is very mysterious and in many ways supports the magic. I think in some ways it becomes, Tamariz talks about like the final false explanation, and in some ways it sort of is like this is where the magic comes from.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think one of the things that I've incorporated with some of the work I'm doing is there's a bit in there that I'm adding in or working on currently and trying to tweak it, get it right. But it's the history of the word abracadabra,
Oh,
which I
right.
think it's real. People don't realize that's going all the way back to Hebrew texts and a little bit further.
Is it like I speak and it becomes real or
Yeah,
something
as
in
I
that
speak,
realm?
I create. And so the original, I'm not going to go into it on here, but the
Yeah.
original meaning of it is quite literally going into Jewish prayer, which is, I grew up Jewish. So when you understand that world and you hear abracadabra, which is broken up a little bit more in the Hebrew language, it's just fascinating. And it goes back even further in the history of it. So people don't realize that. So I think it's really important. And I think it's phenomenal that you have bits in there that is real history. It's not U.S. history or, the big
Yeah.
stuff, but it's history. So
Be fun to do a magic show about the Declaration of Independence.
let's talk about Tannins Magic Camp. So many magicians have passed through there. I feel like they're coming from all over the world to be there. What was your experience like? How did it shape the way you think about your magic?
So the first time I went, I was 11, and I was. This is how they get you. I was very young. 11 was very. I think that was a little young, and I was like I didn't hit my growth spurts and stuff until much later. So I was a very little kid, and
Mm-hmm.
I was like homesick, and I had a great time, but it was tough. But then that they like I won one of the competition prizes,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like that's how they get you. So then you're like, well, I like these people. But man, it was just, even from the first time, it's just the most amazing place to go for a young magician. I think this is still the case, but in different ways. But I just turned 39, so I'm like, I've been around for a little bit. And when I was, starting in magic, it was still very much a small subculture. Like you didn't have, oh man, I don't want to say this sentence, but like, you couldn't look stuff up on YouTube and
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And I actually think that stuff's great. And
Mm-hmm.
like if I was 13 right now, I would
Mm-hmm.
be on you learning everything on YouTube all the time
Mm-hmm.
and geeking out. But you didn't have that. So to meet a magician at all was a very rare, special, even going to a magic shop or anything to get your issue of the magic magazine in the mail. So to suddenly be in a place where you're not just surrounded by magicians, but like people who are your age, who are all the same level of obsessed with this stuff.
Mm.
And to just, I've never been a huge convention person, but I think with a convention, you never forget that you're at a magic event. And the thing that's so amazing about camp, and there's sort of two parts to this, is you are so truly just immersed in this that, and I still have this, like by the end of the week, I'm just like, oh yeah, this is just like what a normal day is like. You go to your morning magic class, you do
Mm-hmm.
that, and you do that. You just completely
Yeah.
forget that magic is an unusual thing.
Yeah.
And I also just kind of on the social level, which like I remember I'd be in the middle of a conversation with someone and I'd sort of, the thought would flash through my head like, oh, it's cool that he does magic also. And I would just forget that that was the organizing principle of why we
We're
were, does that
all
make
wizards
sense?
here.
Yeah, like you would forget because, you're just like, this is my friend. I still
That's
have that
funny.
sometimes.
Yeah.
There are people who I've known for so long that we don't talk about magic a lot. And I'm like,
Mm.
right, like he's a killer.
Right.
But yeah, it's just always been the most positive. I think magic, often the community has a difficult time with that balance between, it's important for an artistic community to have a certain positivity about it. Nobody wants to hang out with 100 people who tell you, you know, quit, you're terrible. Like you need people who encourage you
Mm-hmm.
and all that. But then you do also, we've all, man, I can't tell you how many times I've, been at some magic thing and I've done a set that I knew objectively was about as bad as I could get.
Right.
And, everyone just walks up and they say, hey, great job. And
Right.
that's it. And I think that's, equally problematic too. And so I think camp is just this really excellent balance of encouragement and gentle, sometimes not, but, critique of
Yeah.
like, we're all in this, we're all at
We
different
get it.
levels, we're all trying to get better.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. I think it is one of those where I am. I'm in Atlanta. There's a community, and I get a lot of flack for saying this, but I'm not afraid to say it. It's not cultivating in that way, and I think it's phenomenal. It's always kind of interested me that Tannins has a very strong community. They've built a community around Magic Camp and just going. The fact that you went to camp at 11 and now you have a show there when the store
pretty nuts.
closes is pretty. I'm sure your experience looking at it, you're just like, it's a full, like, you probably never thought that was going to happen.
Yeah, it's funny. What's interesting, because I when I first started going to the camp, it was also the Tony Spina era of Tannins.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think at the time, I mean, Tannins was great, but I know that it was sort of, at that point, its reputation was maybe not quite where it had been, a
Mm-hmm.
little earlier, like with Irv and Lou.
That whole
And I
time
also,
period, I feel like.
it was a weird little
Yeah.
segment. And then I think Adam Blumenthal has done a lot to really like and remind people of the history and whatever. And so for a good chunk of my first experience of camp, and I'm not from New York, I'm from Massachusetts, So I almost didn't think of Tannins as a magic shop of much. Like, it just wasn't a big part of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And even when I would visit, but don't tell anybody this, but when I would visit New York City, I'd go to Abracadabra.
Oh,
And
that's it. I gotta end it.
I know, I'm sorry. We'll edit that out. But so all that to say, I don't often think about like the connection between camp and like the show.
Right.
But what I do think about is, I worked as a magic demonstrator for a long time at Tannins, but also like I in Massachusetts, I worked at the Magic Art Studio. What I do think about is like this, think I may have cracked the code of like how to translate one's magic demonstrator experience and then basically like charge a ticket price for people to come in and see you do wonder bubbles and then reflect on it. So that's the arc that is
That's
kind of funny
Yeah.
to me.
No, I feel the same way. I mean, growing up in New Jersey, we would go to a magic shop in New Jersey I don't even know if it's still there anymore. I have no idea what happened to it, where it
Do you
went,
know what
but
it was called?
I don't. It was in the back of a costume shop. I grew up in Rivervale, so we would drive through like Hillsdale and a little bit further, and we would end up at this standalone building on the left of, I guess, the main road there, and it was like a costume shop. But in the back was like this dark area with all these creepy masks and everything and black lights. And then like right behind there was like a random magic counter. It was
Yeah. It's very common. And I think some of the best that there, I actually don't know if it's still, I know there was like this place Halloween Adventure, which was in Union Square, is in Union Square, and it's a big multi-floor costume shop. And in the basement, there's this like little caged-in area with a magic shop. I mean, it's pretty kind of sexy in its own way. Like, you'll notice I use these terms. It is Valentine's Day, so maybe that's why I'm describing these things. But
you're ready.
man, I mean, there's something so mysterious about like, oh, you thought this costume store was strange and unusual. Well, this is just like a front for an even more unusual, even less sustainable business model.
It's sustainable.
But no, I think that happens with magic a lot, where there's this sort of weird, there are these adjacencies, like I remember there was like not that they're equivalent, but there was like a really great street juggler I would see growing up, and going and talking to him after his set when I was very young, and him being like, oh, I do this one magic thing. And then, I have this memory of all this wild, amazing stuff happening with these gigantic coins. And I'm in retrospect, I'm pretty sure he was doing just like some basic stuff and then like hopping half.
Yeah.
But I'd never seen those big coins. But yeah, there's just that kind of variety arts slippage where there's like, oh, you want to dress up like Dracula? Well, we've also got a Svengali deck if you need it.
Dracula,
this sort
doing
of weird
Svengali.
Yeah, just things that are kind of like, I think it happens in other I don't want to say countercult, like subculture stuff. Like I think the kind of in like the like punk world, there's just a lot of, vegan music, lifestyle, politics, like things that kind of relate to each other. That generally magic is kind of pretty separate from that because we don't have any real connection to the world. But
it's interesting. I think magic is starting to get in that sort of area as well, where there's starting to be different bubbles off of the mainstream of there's magic and then the contemporaries kind of started going that way, but I think our generation is really starting to put definitions around certain bubbles and things like that, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's just the art form is big enough now, and there are enough people interested that there's just real space for different kind of schools of thought to emerge and different sets of priorities. It's it's a good, healthy thing. Arts are supposed to have different groups of people who, have very strong opinions about, how it should be done, which is, it's adorable because, you'll hear two people who have like 95% the same priorities, but because they have a disagreement about how you should turn over a card. It's
Right.
like, oh, that guy,
Right.
he's just the worst.
Magic politics is what I call it.
I love it. I have this airplane theory, which is it's like, one in like even the, and we don't have to go down this because it's a silly thing, but like even the most difficult whatever person anyone in Magic has ever encountered, in comparison with the kinds of stuff people in the rest of, what it actually means to be like a not upstanding citizen, everyone in Magic is generally a pretty decent person who could, just compared to other things.
Yeah.
And I have this theory that it's like, everyone has folks they, I don't know, like or don't like, but man, you're on a 6-hour-long plane ride and all of a sudden person X, Y, and Z sits next to you. You two are gonna have the best conversation. You're like, wow, I don't have to just like talk with some, random person about their pyramid scheme. Like we get to just talk about card tricks all day for the next 5 hours.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good.
Yeah. Let's talk about, you have another show, Platform Magic.
Yeah.
Different venue, different part of New York. Talk to me a little bit about that. Is that something that was more like I'm sitting down with and scripting and we're...
Yeah, so I lived in New York City for a long time and moved to Sleepy Hollow, which is in like Westchester, which is sort of, suburb of New York City, which is where once you get old, it's where you move to after you leave Brooklyn. And I just sort of had a desire to try to do something locally, for kind of business reasons, but also just felt because I kind of I'm a creature of habit. So I like having a thing that I do repeatedly.
Right.
And I was sort of looking at different spaces, and this place, it was like a train station house, like where you go in and you wait and you buy your ticket. And for the past maybe 15 or so years, it's no longer, it hasn't had that function for a very long time, though it is still basically right there on like the train stop, the train platform. So I would pass it. It's now rented out as by the Hudson Valley Writers Center. And so that's how it's a place where they have poetry readings and lots of different events. And I would, every time I took the train into the city to do a show, I would pass it. And then I would always be like, man, that looks like it would be a cool space. And then I kind of got in touch with them about renting it out and had some ideas about some like new things I wanted to work on that, interestingly, it actually came about because I was like, man, I've been doing this show that's so much about history and, there are magic tricks that I do in Magic After Hours that are things I'm kind of doing for nostalgic purposes or, like the Money Maker, which I think is a good magic trick. I don't think it would be like my top 10 desert island things, but the feeling behind it is really important. And I was and there's all these stories. And so I was sort of thinking about like, we always in Magic think about the presentation, all the stuff. And I was like, what if I just really thought about what I consider to be the most deceptive, diabolical methods, not things that I created, but just in general Magic, like what are things that I find very powerful. And that was kind of one principle that I just had in my head. And then the space just seemed interesting. And I was sort of like, how do I know that I don't want to walk out and be like, the freight train first came to America. And like, I knew I didn't want to be that on the nose about it. But so I was sort of trying to find what I could do. I've kind of had this notion for a long time of doing a magic show that has something to do with the theme of lost and found, because I feel like that is it's a very interesting kind of umbrella for a lot of the magic we do is sort of this like ritual of losing and finding, whether that's, and it's pretty anything from a card being selected and lost and found. But I mean, even if you think about it, like mentalism in a way is this sort of thing that you arrange to, a thought that you arrange to kind of not have access to, or like in the context of think about a center tear, it is almost like you're losing this and then trying to recapture it. And I kind of liked that again, not to spell it out, but I kind of just like that in relation to, a train, and just that where people are leaving stuff, all the losing things or running into people that they've met or not. And so
Right.
that was stuff that was in mind initially when working on it. It's shifted around a little bit because, I've just I realized that creating a completely brand new show out of whole cloth while also keeping like a pretty busy schedule of other things was a challenge. And
Yeah.
I'm very glad that I did that for the first handful of performances, because it was really quite thrilling to just do a completely new thing. And now I'm kind of trying to dial in more, and I have a few things in it that I do in other shows because I just want kind of start with best foot forward.
Right.
And so now it kind of feels like that good mix. And yeah, it's in flux. I would definitely say it is. I wish I kind of had the time to just drop everything and just spend 8 hours a day working on this.
Right.
But part of the reason I did it
Mm-hmm.
and am continuing to do this is because I'm not able to just do that thing. So it's sort of forcing me to chip away at this now that I've kind of gotten a good chunk of stuff out in the air, forcing me to chip away at it in a little, in a way.
Yeah.
So, in maybe in 15 or 20 years, it'll be something.
Yeah, absolutely. You obviously you have two shows. And then when you didn't have two shows during the pandemic, you had Backstage with a Magician.
Yeah.
Virtual, totally different. Talk to me about that. I've talked to many magicians about their shows and how they've changed it for the pandemic and virtual. What was that like for
Yeah,
you?
that was quite a thing. So I was very lucky that very early on, like I think April of 2020, I've had a long standing relationship with Atlas Obscura, and they were like connected with Airbnb and a bunch. Basically, they kind of had a platform for virtual experiences. So very quickly they were like, "Hey, can you?" As always happens, people were like, "Man, you should do a Zoom magic show." And I was like, "I'm not gonna screw that. I'm not gonna do a Zoom magic show." And then I get an email from them, and they're like, "Hey, can you come up with an hour-long virtual magic show?" And I was like, "Sure, I'll have it tomorrow." And, but so I was able to do a lot of them really,
Yeah.
really early, before it was like super established. Uh, it was almost the reverse of the process I'm describing, which is with the other thing. Initially, it was almost all material that I was doing in other like live stuff. And I think relatively quickly, it was all things that were kind of specifically kind of what is best suited to this, what is sort of fits my concept. And, by the end, I think I was pretty sick of it. And I think there's a pretty small number of people who I know Harrison Kramer has just done an amazing job of like making it and owning it and really like making it his thing. And you can tell he's just like the
He was killing
person
it.
you want, and still is. Like he just is the right person, right time, right place. But I think by the end I was like, man, I don't really want to be doing this anymore. What I would say is the first 3 to 6 months of it, it was fun because I think in magic, we do sometimes get overly precious, and you just get very granular, and
Right.
you sometimes lose sight of that creative thing of like, I have this knowledge base and this skill, and it's supposed to be messy, and it's magic. Failing in magic is just really scary because it's just like, anytime you do a performance, you're like, is this the time I want to take a risk that it could affect this particular group's
Right.
experience? Or is it better to go with something safe?
Absolutely.
And it's like, I think everyone deals with it, and it's irresponsible to not at least think about that a little bit. It's part of the reason why the platform thing I was describing, I sort of wanted to make sure there's some strong stuff there. With the COVID thing, everybody knew that whether you were like a random magic guy, or I keep going back to seeing like Lin-Manuel Miranda on Fallon with like his corded iPod headphones doing a thing, and it looking, like
Yeah.
not polished.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's the point, is
Right.
nobody, we were sort of talking, I think, before about like like nobody is pretending that they're comfortable with this
Right.
and that they're anywhere other than at their home,
Right.
And so
100%.
that was really thrilling when to just have people who were really grateful that you were doing like something to
Right.
make them think about anything and feel connected to the world in any way. But they also really got like, this person is out of their depth a little bit. And so that period was really thrilling. I think at a certain point, people started getting a little more used to polished virtual experiences.
Mhm.
And also there was starting to be this creeping thing of like, so is this just the world now? Like this
Right.
doesn't feel novel anymore. And so
Right.
that was that.
It
It
got
stopped
weird.
being quite as fun.
Yeah.
I will say that relatively recently, I had stopped doing virtual stuff a while ago, but I had made an agreement with a client to do a thing, and I was sort of like, this is going to totally fall through before they actually ask me to do it. And then, the day comes and I did like a very kind of stripped down, just like laptop close up mat deck of cards thing. And
Yeah.
it was honestly really fun because it
Yeah.
kind of reminded me of that initial time of just like,
Right.
we're hanging out.
Yeah.
I don't, so
That's awesome. Your newest role is magic editor for Genii magazine.
there you go.
It's
Yeah.
really, in my world, it's really big. Talk to me about Genii magazine. Talk to me about, Jim Steinmeier has been giving us, little hints before you guys actually released it. And then we get the February issue and boom, it is a full revamp. And
Yeah.
it's
It's
almost a
some,
mix of the Sphinx and older, periodicals. And it's also something really new.
yeah. I grew up reading Jeannie, and it really kind of going back to that thing of like, it was that portal. I would run
Mhm.
home when I knew that it was supposed to be. Now I'm on the other side of this, but like when you get used to the thing and you look on the Jeannie forum, like, okay, it's been mailed. It generally takes 2 days after that. So I'm like, this is probably the day, or I'd like,
Mhm.
call my mom and I
Yeah.
would run home from school to get
Yeah.
that thing. And, it was really thrilling. And so it's kind of wild to be like part of that now. And yeah, Julie Eng, who's the executive director, kind of called me, and I've known her for a long time. And she, asked if I was interested in doing this. And my first thing was like, in my head, I was like, oh, absolutely not. I have no interest. And then I started talking about Jeannie and what I kind of loved about it and what opinions I had. And I kind of realized mid conversation, like, oh, I kind of have to do this.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, working with her and Jim Steinmeier and also Vanessa Armstrong and Chloe Olowitz. Yeah, we've been really working hard, and it was really exciting to get that first issue up and see it. And there's just been a lot of, it turns out every single decision is a decision. And that's been really hard to just realize. Every single possible moment or square inch of the magazine is like a decision that has to be made aesthetically, content wise. And so figuring out a lot of that stuff and
Mhm.
trying to make those puzzle pieces fit has been really exciting. And so holding it in my hands has been fun.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
now the only hard part is like, oh, wait, we got to do it every month now. Because the first issue we had 5 months or 6 months to do. And
Right.
now it's like, wait, we already,
Yeah. I had a publication over the pandemic, or when I started the podcast. I wanted to build a community around it, and I tried to do my own publication. I came out with 4 issues. Alex was in one of them. I had Michael Vincent, Harrapin, just a bunch of different people but this now, being on the other side of it, I was running it by myself, and I was doing it every month. So I'm reaching out to people, writing my own material. My best friend in Magic, I was like, hey man, love you. I need you to contribute like an article about something. And then, it started to piece together. And then towards the end, what I was trying to do is I had an editor, and I was piecing it all together, and pretty much he would go through and read it all. And then I found out the stress of it all just kind of ripped it all apart very quickly. And I kind of made a decision of, this isn't sustainable for me, so I'm just going to end it. But getting
Yeah,
ready
I
to
have no
re-release
idea
them,
how. Yeah. Oh,
but doing
what's it called?
it's called The Dope, another historical, word in the magic world, the insider information and that sort of thing. So I'll be posting it within the next few months here. But yeah, running it by myself, is like, it's impossible.
I can't fathom. I mean, we've got like that main team I mentioned, and then Mike Vance is the world's greatest proofreader, and like a whole bunch, someone else doing I cannot fathom doing that by oneself. I still have no idea how.
And designing
Richard
it, I forgot to say
Kaufman.
that.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I mean, wow. Yeah, I can imagine that being a lot.
Yeah. So as a magic editor for Genii, you're in a position to kind of shape the discourse of curate it a little bit better and what's going through. Or, I mean, I would say you're the filtration of what's being put into the magazine magic wise. So what's your vision for that? What do you see that hasn't been there before?
I don't want to phrase it as like things that have or haven't been there before, just because there's, it's so easy when you're like new at a thing to kind of talk about it in relationship to what's happened in the past, and so
Right.
like everything that everyone's been doing has been amazing, and everyone's kind of donating their time, but so I can kind of only just think about like what are my priorities now. And a big thing for me is I feel like I just have this desire to kind of reconnect with magic being something fun and creatively inspiring. Honestly, like that kind of atmosphere I was describing of magic camp, of like the fun, the sharing, the trying things that don't always work, the creative exploration with some reverence for the past,
Yeah.
a healthy sense of critique without maliciousness.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, I think trying to get that atmosphere and get that sense that, you close the magazine and I think we all have those things where, for me, it's like when I wake up and have my first cup of coffee, that you're able to just sit down and be a kid for a while, whose only priority is like, how do I do this switch of these two cards better? And you're able to get in that mode because, the world is constantly telling you that, like, how are you going to monetize this? How are you going to, like, how does this?
Yeah.
And so to just get into that very pure space where you're just working on this thing and you are at the level you're at, like you're not doing it while wondering about some other performer.
Yeah.
And so, especially with the magic, I want things that will get me excited about refining things I already do, that will kind of get me excited about creating things.
Right.
And just make that feel possible. I don't know if that's a good answer.
I think from my experience, it's very similar in terms of growing up with Jeannie. I think more recently as an adult, once I circled back through into magic again, Jeannie magazine was a magazine, and I feel like there were certain pieces in there that were phenomenal. I will say on the new issue of Jeannie, I really found myself going through every page and enjoying it in a much different way than I was with the original, the previous group. And it's really interesting. I'm a big reader. So it's one of those things where it's like magazines is in a really interesting spot culturally, just in general. So when we're looking at our specific world of magic and we're looking at publications and periodicals, I truly think Jeannie is doing, and this isn't because you're on here or a guest, or I've been talking with friends about the new Jeannie, and I think this is going to be much bigger and better than you guys understand.
Well, that's very exciting to hear. The one other thing I was going to say is remember having a professor in college who said, some writing is partly show business. And I do think of like the issue, kind of like rhythm was very important. So that's part of the reason articles are a little shorter, is
right.
is not because, I think we'll have longer stuff and we do want to have that. Intellectual depth is really important. It's always going to be very important to me, which is why, we've got like a historical account of, Al Baker by Gene Hugard annotated. Like that stuff's important. But I do think that rhythm of like different ideas, and you want it to feel like a show where there's something that's like a little more like intellectual, and then something that's a little fun and digestible, and then that's why at the end we have that like super quick conversation with Darren Brown. Is like it is like a magic show, in that you want to kind of, and I know not everyone's going to read it cover to cover, but you want it to kind of have that feeling of something that progresses.
I think it's I'm very excited to see what you guys do next with it.
Well, wait for the next issue is a hoot. It's there's some fun stuff.
I have 2 more things, and then we can dwindle out. What's next? You have Magic After Hours, Platform Magic, Jeannie. Your hands are pretty full. Your schedule's pretty full.
Yeah, and
any interest in product? Like, are you interested in releasing a product?
No. I mean, I guess Jeannie is probably the closest thing to that.
Yeah.
But no, I don't have a strong, and it's not from the like, I genuinely have no idea what I would like. I don't have that kind of, I think I have made, creative discoveries that I'm proud of, but I think most of the stuff I figured out doesn't have that shape to it. Mm-hmm. And I feel like if I did have a surplus of those kinds of ideas, I wouldn't necessarily have a reason not to share it. But I do feel like I'm always in that, like, the mind of the student. Right. And so I think I have difficulty with the idea of, and I guess I shouldn't think of this in relation to Jeannie, but like in terms at least of, releasing like a product or like a download.
How you release it?
I don't feel comfortable with that idea of like, and now I'm going to tell people how they should do.
I think your motivation is different. Mm-hmm. I think the way you're going about cultivating your magic into the world is different.
Yeah, I would also say, you Game of Thrones person.
Yeah, in the beginning, and then that dwindled out recently.
Do you remember there's the sword teacher. I don't remember his name, and he says, "I'm the greatest swordsman in the 7 kingdoms." Right. And you know that he's not, and he knows that he's not, but that's his job as a teacher. That's what you need when I'm in situations where I'm teaching someone who's like, I don't really do this as much, but I would notice it with younger people. Like, I feel like when you're teaching, you do need to have a certain impermeable bulletproofness to your, like, you need to have that projected confidence in your point of view, whether you believe it or not, because it's part of the, like, you need to give them something to agree with or disagree with or whatever. And like, that makes sense if I'm teaching something to like a 10-year-old or 11-year-old. And I like to meet them where they're at. I don't try to like, I'm exaggerating, I think, my meaning, but I don't think I'm ever going to feel comfortable speaking in that way to, grown adults who know a lot about magic. But yeah, I think it's just not a huge thing.
Yeah. The last thing I have for you, which I think we may end up cutting it out, which is fine, but it's, I think, sentimental to you. You once emailed one of the greatest wizards to have lived, Tim Conover, and you had a question about magic, and his response ended up, I would believe, having a huge impact on you. Can you talk about that exchange and what that was like? And
yeah, I was actually, it's funny. It was like right before going to magic camp, and I'd heard a lot about one of my main teachers still and growing up was Jamie Swiss, and I would just hear this name Tim Conover like whispered, because he wasn't part of like the whatever, he's a worker, and found his email and just kind of, I emailed him very open-endedly. It was like, I've heard a lot about just the way you approach magic, and would you be willing to share some of that? and he writes back this sprawling email. I think some of it was stuff he had written up previously for a lecture, so I'm totally fine with that, because in the moment it felt like just this guy unloading just this
Mm-hmm.
whole worldview of really rigorous attention to like what makes a powerful effect, and also what makes like a truly powerful, devastating method. I'll be
Mm-hmm.
honest, he's still hugely inspirational. I still see him as like the sort of like that
Mm-hmm.
slightly unhealthy idol you have, but I don't know if I've like hit. I think I've found my space in magic, and I don't know if it's. I think he definitely instilled in me this sense that the classics have this really deep
Mm-hmm.
magic to them, which was probably important because at that time, like the street magic-y stuff was there.
Right.
But I do think whatever I've figured out is probably something different than that like visceral, like this guy just turned close-up Matt into a ferret and made a
It's
shot
excellent.
glass appear out of nowhere. And
Right.
like, I think I, for better or for worse, gravitate towards things that have a little bit more subtlety to them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's probably for the worse. So I'm still like,
Yeah.
my project of being able to say that my work is inspired by him is still very much in its early stages. But yeah, it was just like he had such a love for magic
Yeah.
and such optimism about how powerful it could be if got away from the kind of corny jokes.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of stuff we just get used to of like,
Right.
well, a simple example is we were talking about, and we only met once, and it didn't even email that much. But at one point I was asking him about the like coins through like the cap and pence.
Mm-hmm.
And he was saying, everybody puts the stack of coins on the back of their hand because they're afraid, but you should really be putting it on the palm of their hand. And I don't know
Mm.
if that's true, but just that ability to, and I think a lot of great magicians have this. Ossie Wind has this, to just say, like, I don't really care that that's the way you've always done it, and everyone always does it that way, because this other option is more
Right.
magical, more visceral, more amazing. And but that it's all coming from a place of positivity. It's
Mm-hmm.
not like a negative, this is wrong. It's just like, why would you do it any other way than this?
Yeah.
But yeah, he was a big inspiration and continues to be, and excited about those books. Excited.
Absolutely. Yeah. We're all
That's happening.
anxiously waiting for them.
Yeah.
But where can people find you? Where can people find your magic?
Yeah, you can find, so my site is Noah Levine Magic. It's got a bunch of my stuff. The show I do at Tannins is Magic After Hours. You can find that online, magicafterhours.com. I'm on Instagram and that stuff in various forms.
Like, smash
Yeah,
that
dude,
button.
just do the smash it up, or just send me an email, anything. But yeah,
Well, thank you so much for joining me and chatting with me.
thank you. Delightful to talk to you.